Glasses. I can't find my glasses. Has anybody seen my glasses?
Please God, not today.
We are gathered here today with the purpose of uniting in matrimony George Esteban Garea, Benjamin Arthur Hull.
Yes! Yes! Yes!
Your love, your dedication, your commitment to each other are an example to be followed.
Word got out to the Archdiocese. You've all known this whole time that Ben and I have been living together.
The decision is effective immediately.
We invited you all here today because, well, your family. With my private lessons and Ben's pension, we need a place to stay.
Why are we even talking about this? I'm the only one with the extra bedroom.
No, it's not about that, Mindy. It's a Poughkeepsie.
Yeah. The name of the film is Love is Strange. The title, did you have a hard time figuring out the title? Because those are so important.
Yeah, no, I take titles very seriously. I major in titles, or I think about them a lot because I need them to resonate for me and hopefully for the audience. And I don't want them to kind of contain the film. I want them to open the film up in some ways. For me, Love is Strange is really about the kind of it's almost like a Shakespearean term. It's the magical quality of love that can't be defined, and the uniqueness for each of us. Whether that be in romantic relationships, but also familial relationships, community, parents and children, all the different kinds of love that the film explores.
Right, yeah. The characters Ben and George played by some unknown actors. John Lithgow as Ben and Alfred Molina as George find themselves, after decades of living in New York as lovers. In the first scene, they get married. Mm-hmm. We meet the family, this family they've created, and shortly thereafter find themselves homeless, basically.
Yeah, one of them loses his job as a choir director for a Catholic high school, and so they don't have any money stashed away, and they can't afford their apartment, so they bring together all the friends and family and their extended family and say, we need some help. And so Alfred Molina's character moves in with two gay cops who live downstairs, and John Lithgow moves in with his nephew and his nephew's wife, who's a novelist played by Marisa Tomei.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's also speaks to not only the overall the economy and the crisis that many people have been facing the last bunch of years, but also very much a situation that New Yorkers find themselves in, where they can't afford to move if they are, many New Yorkers anyway, that they might be able to sell their place, but they may not be able to necessarily move into. So it's a kind of like this very practical series of problems that these guys all of a sudden face,
Well, I think they stand for a kind of precariousness that many of us experience in all different realms, including the economic. And there's other kinds of vulnerability in the film which have to do with emotional vulnerability within intimate relationships. When I first started working on the script with Mauricio Zacharias, my co-writer, I personally went from living alone in my New York apartment to living with my husband, our two kids who were babies, their mom, and various family members who would come to visit. And to me, it was like a multi-generational family epic in my little New York apartment. And I think that kind of contained quality to these large family issues was really compelling to me.
It's interesting. The first thing I thought of asking you actually was more about why you chose to go with two older, dare we say. Of course, only two actors like John Lithgow and Alfred Molina could actually convince us that they're older men. They're so young. But no, you chose to go with, as your two primary characters, older men, as opposed to, as you might have done like in Keep the Lights On, where they were actually even younger, maybe.
Yeah,
yeah. So I'm wondering, were you projecting some of your anxieties or You know, what was why
I think
why
it
that?
was more hopeful than projection. I think that I was looking at relationships and individuals just as much in the generation ahead of me and maybe my grandparents' generation also, people I've been close to, including my mother and my stepfather, who've been together for 43 years. And I'm situated somewhere in the middle, wondering what life will look like, but also really honoring those lives. So it was both a kind of imagination of the future, but also an attentiveness to the very present of that generation.
Do you find yourself as a storyteller? I know you co-wrote, as you said, with Mauricio Zacharias, but do you find yourself as someone who, like, you look from outside and you kind of look at your life, and try to gain perspective? Is that what kind of drives the?
Well, I actually think being a filmmaker, being a storyteller, it's a bit like being an analyst. And when people have asked me, because I did spend 17 years in psychoanalysis, they've said, so what would you look for in a good therapist? And I've always said it's a combination of analytic ability with empathy. And I think those two things are both super significant for being able to tell the story. You need to see it from above, but also from inside. And so it's a kind of moving from one to the other in a certain way.
It's a beautiful film. I got to see a day on the set, or at least an evening myself, because, I was at the bar when you shot the penultimate scene.
Yes.
And I was also in the street scene. But when I was in the bar, when you were shooting the scene with John, and we've just gone through this a very emotional period of time with these two guys. They're really suffering, mostly out of maybe some level of not communicating enough, because they're living apart, and it's very painful for both of them, and they're both scared. And then they're not talking, and one feels guilty, like he caused the problem. The other one is, dealing with anxieties himself, and then they get together in the bar, and there's this kind of relief that happens. But I was there, and you told me why you wrote about, or why you created the story of the two older guys. But now on the other side of it, I'm wondering, how is it as a director to direct them? These two very
seasoned,
larger than life. I mean, they're both pretty.
Yeah. It was easy.
Okay, good answer.
I mean, really.
Yeah.
Because I think before we started shooting, we recognized that we could trust each other, and that goes in both directions, in the sense that they trusted me to keep an eye on things, and I had a certain kind of quality of naturalistic performance that I was after, and they wanted to achieve that also. And I trusted them to kind of, and that really starts, you only really know you can trust them when you start shooting, because I don't rehearse before I start shooting. So I don't actually know how it's going to feel, but I trust my casting pretty well and my process. But I think once I saw the kind of emotional range of what I was getting on a daily basis, I was very, very happy. And so I think by the time we shot the scene you were in as background in Julia's bar, we all were really had a lot of love for each other. So I think that came through the scene.
It did, yeah. And how much in chronology did you shoot in this case?
Not so much, because actually, based on various schedules, we shot most of Alfred Molina's stuff first. And then, so the first scene was when he gets fired from his job, which I'm not revealing too much because it happens in the first 10 minutes of the movie. And then they overlapped for maybe a week, and then Alfred went away, and we had John to end with. So you were probably, that scene was shot in the middle.
Did you construct the film around knowing maybe that you would get two very busy actor? Okay,
no.
I that would be odd, but then again, I don't know, because it would have changed the whole process of making the film if you had many more films of these two guys together. Correct? I mean,
yeah, but it's a film really. It's a remarriage comedy. Which is a genre. I mean, you'd think of films like The Lady Eve or Happen One Night or Palm Beach Story. Mm-hmm. These are all films about a married couple who gets separated, and part of the suspense of the film is how are they going to get back together?
Yeah.
And
when they do.
And when they do,
Yeah.
then we learn more. What happens next? But I think that structure is about separation, and yet we needed very important scenes in the middle where you see the two of them actually in a very intimate scene, a very romantic scene, and a very daily scene. And you understand that it's the seeing them in bed with each other, talking and pillow talk is, I think, where you most deeply understand what they have to lose.
Right. And how universal.
Yeah, the universal nature is not something I had to think very much.
Go ahead, Ipes.
Well, I just feel like I just try to write characters, and this isn't even bullshit. I just try to do it well, and if so, I mean, I wrote a film about a Russian woman living in Memphis, and there's not that many Russian women living in Memphis, and in 50 Shades of Blue, she is the heroine, and I like films. I'm from a neo-realist tradition, and I like films that attempt to make the ordinary extraordinary, and that has to value the individual. So there's a humanist kind of thing at play also.
It's interesting now that you mentioned that there really isn't. What is the name of the friend who comes over?
Vlad.
So you still have your one person who's sort of the I don't want to say fish out of water. Is that the term? Because in the prior films that you mentioned, not only 40 Shades of Blue, but also in Keep the Lights On, when you have a primary role of somebody who is a fish out of water. They're not born. They're not from.
That's
the
all
place
true.
They find themselves.
That's true, and I would say two things. One, the drama of the film is that they are fish out of water because they go live with people not in their own home, so that there is this kind of discomfort that comes with that.
Right.
I would say this is not a film really about alienation, which my previous films had been very much about. They'd also been films of self-discovery, and what's so great about, I would say, Ben and George, but I would say equally about John Lithgow and Alfred Molina, is these are guys who know themselves. And I think that's one of the reasons people want to spend time with them, is because it's appealing to spend time with people who are comfortable with themselves.
I didn't have a very productive day.
You know my favorite story of yours?
What's the neighbors again?
No, it's your uncle.
Which one is your favorite?
Uncle Ben.
My friend is here. We need to work on a school presentation, and there's nowhere else for us to.
Who?
That's so gay.
He doesn't mean homosexual, Uncle Ben. He just means stupid.
Hey, can I have some private time, please?
When you live with people, you know them better than you care to.
There was a famous sip-in right here in this bar.
Oh my God, you're that guy?
Yeah, that's one of the guys.
Wow. Well, this runs on me, fellas. You're such a liar.
The film, which is called Love is Strange, is premiering everywhere in the country. How many cities are you opening?
I think we're going to, by sometime in October, we'll be in about 150. So we're getting out there.
This is a big one, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think the response has been encouraging, and I think people seem, I'm hoping that word of mouth thing, because people, I think, respond to the film when they see it and it's not what they expect. And I think that's, they sort of read about it. It's really about 3 generations, and it's a very broad family story in terms of the portraits it paints. So I think that there's all these unexpected access points for audiences.
It just so happens also on Friday, and may not be necessarily on your radar, because I can imagine that Love is Strange is taking up a lot of space in your life at the moment. But it sort of happens that Keep the Lights On is actually going to be having a premiere as a streaming on Fandor the same day.
Oh, really? Oh, that's a nice circumstance.
I think so too, because I think what one thing that occurs to me is that and you can respond or not, but like as a filmmaker, when you're making a new film and then you move on, your relationship to your past films, I wonder what that's like. And, there's now more of a, ways like with a company like Vandor where they're trying to kind of create more, looking at the body of work.
Yeah.
And
but I think that's been something people have wanted and tried to do for, the auteur critics and who are trying to understand. I do feel that there's an ongoing narrative, and that could be true with all sorts of filmmakers. I'm sure it's true with Spielberg also. I think in my case, I'm very familiar with trying to understand that narrative. I got the chance when Keep the Lights On came out, the American Museum of the Moving Image did a retrospective.
Oh, yes, I remember that.
And there were probably 6 people in the audience in certain screenings, but I was at most of them because I found it an opportunity to actually watch the films on screen. And I learned a lot. And it was actually useful going forward to understand certain things about the work.
Mm-hmm. Are you already...
I'm deep in.
Yeah. I like that you know what I'm saying.
Yeah. Mauricio and I are working on a third film that we consider the conclusion of a trilogy of New York stories. This one's about 2 boys who are 10 and 11. And for various reasons, one of them takes an oath of silence and stops speaking to his family. And the film is about the consequence of that action. And it's also about, maybe similarly, it's about parents and children and real estate. There's a big real estate issue. So I'm starting a new genre, which is the New York real estate film.
Oh, I think there's plenty there. And they're doing it on the documentary side. There's no reason why narrative film shouldn't be doing it as well,
Well, it's dramatic. And we're very, Mauricio and I had a wonderful opportunity when we first started working together to see 10 or 12 Ozu films at the IFC. And you want to do something that's certainly, they're not all the same, and they're each individual stories, but I believe in the small story, well told, as having can be really big, and so I want to make a kids film. So I'm actually interested to try to. It's an aesthetic sort of challenge to figure out what that looks like.
And you're talking about one that's accessible to kids.
Correct.
Yeah, but can you just describe your relationship with Mauricio and?
Well, I will say he's the godfather of my son, and I say
you have 2 kids. One's a girl.
Kids. Yeah, I have a girl named Viva and a boy named Felix.
Okay.
And I say that I mention that because I think Mauricio.
I remember that now because I remember they were both like life and happiness.
Yeah,
I think we talked about that in the past.
My relationship with Mauricio is familial, and I think that's really necessary, or at least for me it is, in terms of a deep collaboration, is that we share values and we share history and we share family and we share life, and that's the stuff that we're trying to get at in our work.
Oh, and you have a sister as well, Lynn.
Yes.
Who is also a filmmaker.
Yes, she's an experimental filmmaker and a kind of documentary work also, and extremely original as an artist, and she's a few years older than me, and was certainly inspiring of kind of the breadth of what was possible in cinema. And I've only taken 2 film classes in my life, and one was from Abigail Child, and the other was from Sue Friedrich.
Oh, and my goodness, Sue! Yeah,
so
she's a friend.
So these were, these were my influences. Came from, I think, my sister and I share an influence of kind of the avant-garde and the you don't always have to be liked. And I think that's important.
Right. And you mentioned Sue, and she's definitely a filmmaker who definitely is not necessarily interested in being liked all the time, because if you saw like Renovation, I'm sure you did, you know that she challenges people to like her, even though they may empathize with her.
Yeah, I mean, I think that...
losing her home.
Yeah, losing her home as an artist.
Mm-hmm.
So... I feel like this film, Love is Strange, was really inspired by a man I was very close to. His name was Ted Rust, and he was a sculptor. And he was my great uncle's partner for about 42 years in Memphis. And in '98, he began his last piece, which was of a young boy with a backpack on. And in '99, he died, and that piece remained unfinished. It's still in clay in my cousin's house. And I love that image of this very ancient man who's still trying to do something creative and is still passionate about the possibility of what he can create. And he's also his interest in youth, which is any number of things, including like an openness, as he was open to me as a dear friend in his last I was a very intimate friend with him from 90 to 99. And I think that's the possibility of relationships that I think Love is Strange really speaks to.
Well, thank you for speaking to it with me today, and I want everybody to go see it.
It's good. Me too. Look at the chance.
No, it was great to see, and it was again that time sitting there and watching them go over the same scene. And somehow making it fresh every single time. I finally saw that in action because it's something I've only heard about.
Yeah.
But to actually watch these two pros kind of with a synergy, going there and then being able to perform a seemingly, mundane kind of interaction. But it was,
Well, I think these two guys are in their prime. And I think that's inspiring.
Yeah.
I think they haven't given this level of performance. They haven't been given the opportunity to do this. And to watch them do it and to spend time with them on screen, I think the audience really loves these guys, and that's very intimate, and that's not something that always happens in movies.
And it's going to be again in New York City as of it's playing. It's Friday the 22nd, and which theaters are we in?
It opens at the Angelica, the Lincoln Plaza, and the Chelsea Bowtie, and then in Los Angeles, it's opening at the ArcLight and the Landmark.
Okay, and the website for people so they can check for details.
LoveIsStrangeTheMovie.com.
LoveIsStrangeTheMovie.com. Check it out for details of where it's screening near you. Go see it. Now, while I have you and you're on record here, let's do this again after you're completely past this, or at some point when the time presents itself where it's comfortable, and we maybe can do a kind of a longer chat
that'd be
with
great.
or without the mics at this point.
Yeah.
But it was good seeing you.
Really pleasure.
Thank you.